Hi, I'm Elena, and I got stuck in a parking lot with my crush. Sounds juicy, right? It definitely was. It was the summer after 10th grade, and my very best friend Rachel and I were learning to drive. But she said that she had a great idea. As much as I loved Rach, the very idea of her great ideas horrified me. But before I could try to talk her out of whatever it was, she pulled into the dump. The dump is haunted, was all I managed to choke out. But Rachel just laughed and said, I've got a great idea for TikTok. We'll be in and out before you know it. I sighed. I just started recording Rachel when I heard a loud rustle. Felt like someone was watching us. I looked around nervously, but Rachel kept demanding my attention. Suddenly, there was a loud crash through the entire building, and I screamed. Then I heard footsteps, loud, echoing footsteps, coming closer. Steven? Standing just behind me was the man of my dreams. As I stumbled away from him, he put his arm around my waist to stop me from falling. Whoa, easy there, he said softly. My heart went wild. Did Steven just touch me? Steven had been my crush for forever. He told us he'd seen her car parked outside and wanted to check if she was okay. What an absolute sweetheart. She laughed and said our car had broken down. What? She winked at me. What was she doing? Then, Steven turned his glorious eyes to me. Who's your friend? He asked. My heart broke at his words. He didn't even recognize me. She's Elena, you idiot. She goes to our school. She's in our grade. Don't tell me you've never seen her. Rachel laughed, and I just wanted the ground to swallow me whole. Steven looked a bit embarrassed and smiled at me. He asked if we were done with the TikTok. I'll drop you guys at home and have someone come for the car, he offered, like the gentleman he was. Rachel was thrilled. Clearly, she'd hoped he'd ask. We started towards his car when suddenly Rachel remembered she'd forgotten her wallet in the car. I'll catch up with you, she said, and sprinted away before I could say anything. With butterflies in my stomach, I walked beside him toward the parking lot, which was below the mall. I shivered as we went below. It truly felt like a scene out of a horror movie, but I felt safe with Steven. There was a buzzing throughout the entire parking lot, and then there was a loud crash. We dropped to the ground, afraid that it was an earthquake, but I quickly realized what it was. I ran upstairs to try and leave, but the door was closed and locked. We were trapped. I banged on the door as loud as I could, but I knew that it was no use. There was nobody to hear our screams for help. I checked my phone. Of course, there was no signal either. Steven checked his phone too. I can't call anyone. What are we going to do now? I asked. Now that the door was closed, it was even darker. If I didn't know any better, I would think the shadows in the corners were alive and coming for us. It's going to be okay, Steven said soothingly. Then he did something unexpected. He took my hand and led me away from the door. Let's look for an escape. We started exploring. My heart hammered wildly, and electricity seemed to run up my arm from the hand he was holding. Yes, I was stuck in an awful place, but I was holding Steven's hand. We looked for a way out, our hands clasped together the whole time. I wanted this moment to last forever, but then I saw a narrow ledge next to a window a few feet above us. If we climb to that, we can yell for help, I said. Steven wasn't sure, but we managed to pull ourselves up. There was an alley running just behind the mall, but it was too risky to jump. That's when I noticed a man sleeping next to the dumpster. He looked homeless. He had a thick beard and his clothes were torn. Hey, you! I yelled as loudly as I could. The man woke up, but he seemed very angry and started cursing. We're stuck up here. Can you please call somebody for help? I said when he saw us. The homeless man said, Give me some money and I'll let you out. What a selfish jerk. I didn't have any money, so I turned to Steven. He shook his head. No money, no help, the homeless guy said and walked off. I wanted to cry in frustration. Suddenly, the stool I was standing on shook, and my left foot slipped, making me fall off. I screamed. I fell into Steven's arms, and he didn't let me go. When I looked up, his eyes stared into mine. He looked so strong and handsome. We stayed like that for a moment, and I almost thought he would kiss me. I wanted him to kiss me so bad, but the moment was interrupted by a loud horn. I looked at him in horror, but he looked like he hadn't even heard it. Was my imagination playing tricks on me? I looked around, shivering slightly in the cold. The place was getting really scary, and I couldn't wait to get out. I had the feeling of being watched again. To distract me, Steven offered to play some songs on his phone. I recognized the first one right away. It was one of my favorite singers. Just then, the music turned to static, and scary voices came out. That's weird, Steven said, frowning at his phone. I clutched his arm tighter, terrified. Steven told me to stay where I was, while he went to look for his car. We would be safer inside it, he assured me. I wanted to go with him, but my ankle hurt from falling. After he left, I sat on the floor when I noticed a shadow move. I froze. Then, all of a sudden, a huge black figure raced toward me. I turned around to run, but fell flat on my face. Panic welled up, and I started to scream and cry. "No, please," I begged out. What I heard next was the sound that terrified me worse than any ghost ever could. I heard loud laughter. I opened my eyes and saw that it was Rachel. She was clutching her stomach and had tears rolling down her cheeks. She was laughing so hard. Steven stood next to her. He wasn't smiling, but of course, he'd been in on the joke the whole time. Worst of all, I saw one of Rachel's hands was in Steven's pocket, and she was holding a video recorder in the other hand. "Rachel, why would you do something like this?" I cried. I couldn't believe it. "You're such a loser for even falling for this," she said. I started to cry harder. I couldn't help myself. My best friend had betrayed me, and she seemed to be enjoying my misery. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Don't take it personally," she said, rolling her eyes. "You were just easy bait because you're such a scaredy cat." I ran out of the parking lot in tears and called my older sister to come pick me up. There was no way I was going anywhere with those two. Before the day was out, the video was already on TikTok. By the next day, it had gone viral, and I was the school's laughing stock. While this was happening to me, Steven avoided me like the plague. At least he looked guilty, but it was Rachel who truly hurt me. She pretended as if I didn't exist. So much for childhood best friends. When the sadness and shock faded, I was angry. So angry. I wanted revenge. I had done nothing to them, and they treated me like dirt. To top it all off, Rachel and Steven were getting closer. They'd even started dating. This was something she'd done before. Whenever I had a crush on a guy, she would also start liking him, date him, and then dump him after a few weeks. This time, I decided enough was enough. I was going to take Steven away from her, and I knew how to do it. I made an Instagram account and hired a professional to take some pictures of me where my face wasn't visible. I wanted to make myself seem mysterious, and my plan began to work. Once my account took off, I followed Steven. After a week of suspense, he followed me back. I slid into his DMs. I flirted with him, and at first, he didn't flirt back. But over the next few days, we texted each other all the time. And I began to think he liked me. Back in school, I was still a big joke, and Rachel encouraged the meanness. I couldn't understand why she hated me so much all of a sudden. I tried to find comfort in the fact that I was going to have my revenge soon. Steven texted me without fail every day, and soon enough, I realized he had feelings for me. He had told me literally everything about himself. The only problem was that I was afraid I would fall for him again. He was such a sweetheart. My heart fluttered every time he messaged. But this was revenge. No mercy. Then I decided it was time to test my power. When he was sitting with the other jocks and Rachel, I texted him asking him to meet me outside. He immediately left the table without telling Rachel or the others anything. I laughed for the first time in days. Revenge was mine. 2 days before the homecoming dance, the time I had set for completing my revenge, I was cleaning my locker when I saw Steven. The hall was empty. I ignored him, but to my surprise, he walked up to me to talk. "Hi, Elena," he said shyly. I had no intention of talking to him and walked away. That night, Mom peeked into my room and said, "There's someone here to meet you." But when I went to the door, there was nobody there, just a small note on the doormat next to a big, beautiful sunflower. It said, "I'm sorry, Elena, for everything that happened. I know it's no excuse, but I had no idea that things would go this far. I wish I had known you before. I know you will never forgive me now." Even though it wasn't signed, I knew immediately that Steven was the one who'd sent it. But why was he apologizing to me after all these months? My heart melted. I was pretty sure Rachel was the one who had convinced him to prank me. I could forgive him. The day before homecoming, I texted him from the anonymous account and confessed to liking him. He said he liked me too. I told him that if it was true, he would have to break up with his girlfriend and take me to the dance instead. He agreed immediately. It'd be so great when he saw I was behind the account and that I'd forgiven him, I thought to myself. I was finally going to date him, and Rachel would get what she deserved. It was the day before the homecoming dance. Today, all of my plans would come into play. First, I rushed to school and waited for the cheerleading practice to start. While Rachel was practicing, I emptied the shampoo bottle she carried and filled it with instant blue hair dye. If anyone was super proud of their blonde hair, it was Rachel, and that was only the first thing she'd lose today. I waited outside the locker rooms. Soon enough, I heard a scream and lots of muffled laughter. I walked away to work on phase 2. I went to the biology lab and released all the frogs and cockroaches. Then I rushed out. I went to Mrs. Hawkins, the lab instructor, cried, and told her Rachel had been waiting for me in the lab. But when I got there, all the frogs and cockroaches were all over the place. She jumped up and rushed to the lab. I heard her cursing. Then she went straight to the principal's office. 10 minutes later, they called Rachel. I hung around the office till I saw her. Her hair looked a horrible shade of blue, and it was so patchy I almost felt sorry for her. Some of the dye had stained her face, too. People were laughing at her. When she saw me, she glared at me and went inside the office. Then I heard yelling and crying. 10 minutes later, Rachel rushed out crying. "You did this!" she yelled. She had been banned from the dance. Finally, it was lunchtime, time for the icing on the cake. As Rachel sat complaining and crying, Steven got up and tried to leave. Obviously, Rachel tried to throw a huge tantrum, but he just shook her off and loudly said, "We're over." Everyone heard. The next day was the homecoming dance, and Steven messaged that he had a huge game before it. He said scouts from huge colleges would be there. I told Steven that even though I wouldn't be able to come to see his game, I was definitely cheering for him. My plan was, he wouldn't see who I really was until the dance. On my way to the game, I saw 2 of the football players who were really close friends with Steven. They were talking about Rachel and Steven. I got closer to hear. "Damn shame that he broke up with Rachel like that," one of them said. "I'm not really surprised. Remember what he did to that freak Elena? His idea for that prank video was genius. He's planning to try out another epic idea on her." He what? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was Steven's idea all along, and he was planning to prank me again? I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. He had almost tricked me again. Just then, my phone buzzed with Steven's text. "Can't wait to see you." I texted him a location and asked him to meet me there. I deleted my Instagram account as I walked out of the locker room. I knew exactly how I would come clean to Steven. I rushed home and grabbed a few cameras and my Wi-Fi device. On the way, I made a quick stop to the toy store. Then I rushed over to where it had all started, the dump. It was evening and the place looked as haunted as ever. But today, I wasn't scared at all. Before he got there, I fitted the cameras in the garage and connected them to my phone. Finally, he walked in, calling me to come out. As soon as he walked in the door, it crashed and locked behind him. On my phone, I heard him laughing. "You naughty girl," he said, looking around for me. I hit play and a recording began playing in the garage. I told Steven who I was, and suddenly I noticed his expression change. He got angry and started yelling for me to let him out. My recording kept playing. "Guess who you shouldn't have told about your fear of spiders?" it went on. Suddenly, Steven stopped yelling. By now, Steven was begging, but it was too late. I released the toy spiders. I'd gotten the biggest, hairiest ones I could find. I heard him screaming, begging, and apologizing to me. The spiders crawled towards him. I waited for him to realize before I pressed the button that would live stream everything to the big screen that had been set up for the big game tonight. That should make it easier for them to find him. I heard his scream as I started my car and drove away.